Hello again and welcome to another episode of the Digital Health and Wearables series. Before I go ahead and introduce our magnificent guest for today, I'd like to acknowledge our global partners and sponsors, Spirit Digital. They have a digital health platform. Please check them out, and also other supporters that we have on board. But without further ado, I'm extremely excited to have Professor Shafi Ahmed today with us. He's a surgeon, an entrepreneur, a digital health futurist, and a teacher. Shafi, how are you?
João, thanks for inviting me to do this with you. I'm good, thank you. Surviving the pandemic like everybody else.
Yeah, before the show, we're talking about that, and thank God we are both healthy and we are here. Yeah, nice to see you. I haven't seen you for a while because the world is kind of on hold, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed, it's been a difficult time for a lot of people, of course, not just in the UK but around the world. It's good to see that we're making some progress with the vaccination program, getting out of lockdowns, and hopefully 2021 will be a change for all of us for the better.
Yeah, fantastic. And the first question that I have for you is, what do you think we could do better to improve the delivery of healthcare?
It's a really good question. I think let's reflect back in the last year or so. It's been a year in the UK since we had the coronavirus and went to lockdown, for example. So a lot of things have happened. I think we've learned a lot about the health systems, how about to cope with pressures and demand. We've seen the inefficiency sometimes of healthcare. So what I like to think is about how we reimagine and rethink the model of healthcare in the future. We've seen the inequalities of health, João, yeah, and the pandemic has shown us the inequalities of health around the world. How do we overcome some of that burden? We've seen the inequalities of social care and primary care, and how do we reimburse that properly? How do we focus the attention away from secondary care into primary social care, well-being, maintaining wellness and health, for example? And so the other thing, of course, is to learn about the world. What do we learn from the experiences we've got from other countries managing the pandemic, or indeed managing other chronic problems and chronic diseases? So I think this is the opportunity for us as a society to rethink that whole model. The other thing, of course, as we go forward, Shao, it's become more expensive for healthcare. We look at the GDP of every country, it's rising year on year almost in terms of the cost for health. We've got an older population, an aging population, more chronic diseases, it's more health issues. How do we use that same money or same finance resources in different ways, smarter? Is technology going to be part of that? I absolutely think so. So we've seen the the explosion of telemedicine and other innovation in the healthcare system. How do we maintain that innovation? How do we make it stick? So we don't go back to the old ways of thinking, but start on this new normal, reset, almost leapfrog where we should have been today if the pandemic hadn't happened. So I think it's an opportunity. It's a wonderful opportunity to rethink that model. And so I'd like to see people challenging and modeling what's out there already. In the UK, we've got the integrated care systems just being launched by the government white paper 2 or 3 weeks ago. That again shows us the way we seamlessly integrate healthcare from social, primary, and secondary care, for example, using data, and using data-driven healthcare with outcomes-based learning. So these are the kind of terminologies that we're looking at in terms of improving the patient experience in healthcare. And that's absolutely vital. And we've seen patients now engage in this new kind of way of delivering healthcare more remotely, more virtually, for example. So I think these are all the things that are happening around us. We kind of encompass those ideas, we embrace them, and we challenge the future.
Oh, fantastic points there. You really nailed some of the pandemic really highlighted, I agree with you, some of the issues, the big gaps, the delivery, the accessibility, but also I think it really highlighted that we're not quite prepared. So, yeah. So, going forward, moving on to the other question, I know one of your passions is VR and AR, I mean, virtual reality and augmented reality, and you've done the virtual training as a surgeon, and it was very, very popular. And we're talking about technology in here. What are the life-changing, cutting-edge technologies that you think will transform healthcare?
So you'd have to edit that one out. So I think one of the really interesting technologies that's come out in the last few years is immersive technology, João, which you've just exemplified, using virtual reality, mixed reality, or augmented reality. So what we're seeing with those technologies, João, is now the implementation. 3 or 4 years ago, we both know it was aspirational, the headsets, the kind of the vision around healthcare. Now we're seeing, again, during the pandemic, the need for virtual education, virtual training, virtual medicine. So now this immersive technology has found its natural home. And we're seeing many people out there, universities, colleges, hospitals, crying out for solutions. So it's a really healthy environment and market, remember, for virtual reality. And there's a few elements. First of all, we're seeing the implementation of virtual medicine, virtual therapy. We're seeing my colleagues, for example, in Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles with Brennan Spiegel, also with Diane Juris with On Comfort in Belgium, actually implementing VR therapy for anxieties, stress, post-traumatic stress disorders, and other chronic diseases. Also, we're seeing them now implement it for ladies and women in pregnancy, during labor, to replace epidurals or reduce the opioid analgesics. So we're seeing now real-world evidence. Thousands upon thousands of clinical patients on trials show the efficacy of these virtual therapies. The other side of that is education. You know, I teach at medical school. I teach a number of medical schools. And go back a few months ago, our students for a year were not allowed to see patients face to face. They were remote because of the fact of the COVID risks. So they were at medical school, but not seeing clinical patients face to face, which again is difficult for them. So we use HoloLens, we use mixed reality. I did a ward round remotely from the hospital at the Royal London where I work. We're using a HoloLens, remotely sending that video image to a lecture theatre nearby. The students were at social distance, and we could communicate, share images, X-rays, blood results, for example, see patients on a ward round in the COVID area. So they could learn and see and feel almost the clinical experience being done, but remotely. We've seen now virtual platforms where you can actually engage between people on virtual platforms. We've seen Spatial IO and others engaging in kind of social area of conversation. This could be used going forward. What we've seen is the real world evidence now of this. The last thing is simulation. Again, if you look at surgery, my own profession, you know, we've been teaching this whole concept of see one, do one, teach one for a long period of time. We know that's going to be challenged, and we have challenged it. Now, simulation is the key. If you're remote and not being able to work in the actual operating theatre, for example, how do you get trained? Now we're seeing wonderful simulation companies have come into vogue. For example, also VR in the US, and others who are now creating training modules in orthopedics and general surgery, so you can actually learn very quickly. And the evidence shows learning is better in virtual reality. The other part of surgery, which is really exciting, is the concept of digital surgery, this new kind of nomenclature that's being used. We've had digital health be pushed for a long time. What we're seeing now is digital surgery. The pillars are changing. It's going to be data analytics. It's going to be advanced visualization, robotics. It's going to use AI in the interface to ensure that we can assess quality of surgical outcomes. And this whole world we've seen now almost explode with so many robots coming out, surgical robots that are smaller, more cheaper, more nimble, more flexible. We've seen people like Proximi working on remote telementoring, teleproctoring, so you can train people remotely across the world, for example. So we've seen surgery itself seems to be the enabler of many of the technologies. And my work with Vodafone as the ambassador shows the power of connected healthcare, the 5G networks, the fast bandwidth, low latency that allows transmission of data imperceptible to the human eye. So you can do remote surgery. We saw it about a year and a half ago, the first operation to be performed robotically, but across China in the eastern province. The surgeon was one part operating on something else a few miles away, but using 5G connectivity. So it's an amazing time to be alive. I think the opportunities are immense, and it's so exciting to see surgery leading that charge of bringing technology appropriate and where it's safe to ensure that we drive better outcomes.
Well, that's fantastic. We could spend a whole hour only on this question, but you mentioned so much in that short period of time. Technology has really matured. You gave great examples there. I mean, and we are ready for implementation, so it will be a great march. Thank you so much for that. And the final question, Shafi, that I have for you is, how can digital health technology enhance the quality and capability of the medical personnel?
So I think, look, we need to engage healthcare workers in a different way. So if you think about, first of all, it's about the digital language. If you look at a year ago before the pandemic, there's a lot of nervousness around innovation technology. People had barriers because sadly we have this kind of thing called dogma tradition in healthcare. We do things, same thing over and over again for long periods of time, that reflecting and changing. And we had the inventors, or like 1% of the population, the early adopters, another few percent. The vast majority of people, 90%, were slow to change, not understanding the reasons for that. What we've seen is that shift now. There's many more people looking at innovation, looking at technology, and how we implement change in our own practices. So that conversation is much better and much easier to have. The other thing is about the digital language. Digital language is scary. AI, robots taking over the world, being disempowered, no patient voice. What we're seeing now, of course, is the language changing, people understanding what AI might be, what VR might be, what patient data might mean to certain people. We're seeing that conversation piece maturing. The healthcare workers need to embrace that. I'd love to see how we almost implant innovation into the heart of every person in healthcare who can also make changes. It doesn't have to be technology. It's innovating their own clinical practice. It's innovating their own clinics, their own patient experience. It could be anything, but it's just about change. It's about, and I always give this quote at the end, of course, João. It's, I always ask audiences, how many of you in the audience want to be mediocre in your lifetime? And the answer is always no, unsurprisingly. That's it, of course. If you don't challenge every process every day and make changes, then you accept mediocrity by definition, almost by default. Who wants to do that? So we've got to enable people to start thinking again, giving them time to reestablish innovation in their jobs. We've seen also the healthcare workers be repurposed. So if you think about jobs for a lifetime, what does that mean anymore? We think about maybe in the future, 2-3 careers, redesigning your job, implementing change. And we've seen repurposing of people in the pandemic from one job to the other, to the front line, for example. So people can be versatile. We're not using their experience and their very human nature of versatility and drive and aspiration in our own kind of work. So I'd love to see more of that, the human side, helping people develop ideas, supporting them to ensure that you have innovation at the heart of the organizations that we work for.
That's fantastic. It's such an interesting conversation. Shafi, we're coming to the end of the interview. You mentioned so much in there, and I'll take from the last question is all about people. Of course, improving the systems and using technology-based technology. People enabling technology, because we used to think it's the other way around. But I finish all my episodes. I could spend hours talking to you, as you know. But I finish all my episodes with a bit of a surprise, which is not really a question, but is 1 minute of fame. Okay, so you can mention anything whatsoever. A personal achievement, a family achievement, a career achievement, a professional achievement, and you have so many accolades anyway. But you can mention anything whatsoever. Over to you, 1 minute of fame.
So look, I think it's been a great place to be for the last few years, working with people like you, João, and others who are really coalescing ideas and thoughts around the world to reimagine healthcare. I've been very fortunate. I've got 2 wonderful children and family, and that's been my greatest achievement, of course, in life, and seeing them mature. They're both applying to medical school this year and next, so hopefully carrying on the tradition of healthcare in my family. But actually, it's more about that. What's the future for them look like? I see them, I see, okay, how does medicine look like in the next 5 or 10 years? And I think it's really exciting how we can almost repurpose that going forward. And the other thing I've been really fortunate is traveling a lot around the world. As you know, João, I've been traveling a lot in the last 3 or 4 years with different communities, different governments, different organizations, different societies, all the same passion for healthcare and to improve quality of life for many people. And that's much like to leave behind. We're in a global pandemic and we're a global community providing global solutions. And let's learn from that going forward as a society to better the future of the world.
Shafi, thank you so much. What a way to finish. We are in healthcare, but I consider you like a close connection and a friend the last few years. I want to thank you for your precious time and, of course, all the expertise and your magnificent insights to reimagine healthcare. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, João. It's been a pleasure.
Just to round up, I would like to thank all our viewers and make sure you share all the magnificent content with your communities in healthcare. I'll see you next time.